and talk.
Those of us in Illinois who've been here for, most of our lives didn't really notice that our neighbors were moving out until probably about 9 years ago, when we started seeing annual census estimates showing that the state of Illinois was losing population. And we're expecting a census report on those annual population estimates today. In just over an hour, expecting those to be released by the U.S. Census Bureau. What's it going to say? Are we going to grow, or are we going to shrink, or are we going to stagnate? I want to hear from you a little bit later on at 217-629-7970. But let's talk about where we've come from for the past year when it comes to our population estimate. So, just flashing back to some of the reporting we've done previously on this, Illinois' population's been shrinking for years as more people leave the state than arrive. Did the trend continue this past year? Well, we're set to find out this morning. So estimates over the past decade have shown that, and I'll pull this up from some previous reporting, the U.S. Census estimates that Illinois lost 114,000 people in 1 year. This was the release from 2021. All right, that's on top of an estimated 80,000 people lost the year before in 2020. In 2019, Illinois lost 51,250 people. Since 2014, the total estimated population lost, this is the estimate, is 406,000. Larger than the populations of Aurora and Joliet combined. So that's the estimate every year stacked on top of each other. So if we lost 100,000 plus people from 2020 to 2021, actually I think it'd be 2020 to 2019, 2019 to 2020. Either way, we've lost more than 400,000 people after 8 consecutive years of population decline. And then we get to, a little bit later on, whenever we finally get the decennial census. And the decennial census is the 10-year census. That's the official count of a state's population. And that's also what's used for congressional reapportionment every 10 years. And what that showed when it was released in 2021 of April, Governor J.B. Pritzker acknowledged that, we are seeing some population decline. Here's what he had to say is the fix, as Illinois was one of 3 states to lose people and also losing a seat in Congress. Here's Governor J.B. Pritzker responding to some of that. Back in 2021.
Over a decade, we've lost population. We've got to turn that around. So I immediately set out to address that with the General Assembly, and we did. We increased significantly the amount of MAP grants that are available to people, making sure that community college students were able to get more MAP grants than they had before, and making sure our merit-based scholarships, Aim High, were increased. So collectively that has helped. Unfortunately, as you know, just when that was starting to take effect, COVID hit.
So Illinois was actually one of the 3 states that actually lost population over the last decade. And we know from our population estimates program that the state of Illinois actually had negative net domestic migration. Again, there were more people moving out of that state than moving into that state.
What we found out today is what we knew all along, what's going on in Southern Illinois, and that is suffering population. And due to 2 things, and the 2 things that we knew, and this kind of verifies it, high taxes and the regulatory environment that discourages private growth and investment.
So this was back in 2021, April of 2021, when we got the decennial census, and it showed that we continue to lose population, though it wasn't as much as what was estimated. Again, the estimate was 8 consecutive years of population decline, totaling more than 400,000. But the decennial census only showed that Illinois lost 18,000, which was enough for us to lose a seat in Congress. But despite that loss of the seat in Congress, you had Democrats in Illinois push to revise the state's estimates upwards. And this is because of a survey that came out earlier this year that said the census may have undercounted Illinois by around 2%. So Democrats took that, including the governor and congressional leaders, and they said, hey, Illinois is growing census per this survey. So you need to revise the state's numbers upward. I talked with U.S. Senator Dick Durbin at the Illinois State Fair this year and asked him about whether or not he's heard back from the census. I still have yet to hear if they have heard back from the U.S. Census, but he was essentially saying, hey, Illinois is growing. Here's Senator Dick Durbin from the Illinois State Fair addressing this particular question.
We lost population according to the decennial census, but we had that post-enumeration survey that said there was a possible 2% or so change, but the census hasn't changed. What's the latest on that?
I haven't received a reply yet.
Why is that important?
Well, it means federal dollars coming back home. The greater the population, the more federal dollars returned to us. I want to help the taxpayers get their money back. I think we gained population. You know, the Tribune's going to disagree with me because they got their own editorial policy, but the numbers speak for themselves.
You know, honesty is always the best policy. You could play with statistics number as much as you want, but I'll tell you, people are hurting. Not just Republicans, but Democrats, independents, people who've never voted
and that's
before.
Kathy Salvi, who was the Republican candidate for the U.S. Senate, talking about these numbers and just some difference of opinion, I guess. But with the new numbers set to come out here in just a handful of minutes, it's going to be released at about 9 o'clock our time. We'll see what the U.S. Census has to say. But anecdotally, you've got leaders like House Minority Leader Jim Durkin, who are making it clear that what they're seeing is not population growth. Jim Durkin here talking about what he's seeing in his own neighborhood.
Shrinking. And proof is that I'll just talk about my neighborhood. Most people that I know have either left and moved to Indiana, or they have a for sale sign in their front yard, specifically because of the tax consequences that they believe is going to be thrust upon them in the near future. We are shrinking.
So, coming up next, let's hear from you at 217-629-7970. Is Illinois growing or is Illinois shrinking? All right, so your phone calls 217-629-7970. We'll get to those next. Let's talk about population. Do you think Illinois is growing or shrinking as we've shrunk consecutively 8 years in a row? And a total estimated of 400,000+. We got the decennial census from 2021 that showed Illinois lost 18,000. We lost a seat in Congress because of that. But Democrats at the State House and in Congress from Illinois are pushing for the census to revise the state's population upward. Regardless of them asking for that earlier this year, the U.S. Census still has Illinois at 12.67 million people, down 1.1% from 10 years before. So today, in just about 45 minutes or so, the U.S. Census is going to release their annual population estimates. Now, we don't have any indication. The U.S. Census says they did not offer any embargo. Typically, members of the media get a detailed release with an embargo saying it's going to be released at this day on this time, and don't release this information. So I don't know if somebody across the country or multiple people screwed up that embargo before. So they're not doing the embargo. It's just going to be released to the public today at 9 o'clock our time at the U.S. Census's website. So we'll be watching that closely, but again, I want to hear from you at 217-629-7970. Do you think that we are growing or shrinking? And let's take a look at some of the other indicators that there have been. One thing that we look at isn't just these annual population estimates, which again, 8 years in a row, the estimates released last year on this day showed that Illinois lost population. Again, 8 years in a row for a total of an estimated 400,000+ lost. So today we'll get those numbers to see if we have a 9th year in a row of population decline estimated, or if we level off, or if we see an increase in population. But what do you think? 217-629-7970. Call in. I answer the phone and put you right on air, and we can talk about this. But some of the other indicators that we've looked at includes tax receipts. Are people of certain incomes moving out of Illinois to other states. And the IRS data that's released annually indicates that that happens year after year after year in Illinois by taking a look at where people file in one state and then where they file in another state the following year. And that shows that Illinois continues to have outbound migration. Now, another indicator that we look at is the Allied Van Lines study. And if you look at their website, they've got an interactive map. National Movers Study, and this is from allied.com. And I've got this set at 2017. All right, and I'm just going to kind of go through here. 2017, you can see the map. It shows states that either have high inbound migration, or they're balanced, or there's high outbound migration. So even in 2017, Allied Van Lines shows, Texas, for instance, high inbound migration. Florida, high inbound migration. Illinois, we've got high outbound migration. So this is from 2017. You can kind of see the map. I'm going to flip through some of the years here. So 2017, you see Illinois in 2018 remains a high outbound state. You see in 2019, Illinois remains a high outbound state. In 2020, Illinois remains a high outbound state. 2021, Illinois remains a high outbound state. And 2022, Illinois remains a high outbound state. If you click on it, you can see kind of some of the total numbers of inbound versus outbound at 33.9% inbound, with 66% outbound. And Chicago numbers there, people are moving to Arizona, Florida as well, Texas. From Springfield, people are moving to North Carolina, New York, St. Louis, Missouri, Florida, Oregon, Indiana. So you can kind of see here Allied Van Lines indicating just exactly where we're at in this picture of total outbound migration across the country. So that's just another indication of, are we going to possibly see that continue in the new census numbers that are going to be released today? I want to hear from you at 217-629-7970. What are you seeing? Are you seeing people move out of the state? Or are you somebody who has moved out of the state and you're just checking into WMAY? I want to hear from you. 217-629-7970. That's the phone number here with Springfield's Morning News. Again, the numbers come out at 9 o'clock our time, the latest U.S. Census numbers. We'll see exactly whether, we're growing or we're shrinking. But let's hear from you at 217-629-7970. Good morning. You're on Springfield's Morning News. What is your prediction?
I know more people are leaving the state, but if you think living in Florida is cheaper, it may be cheaper taxes, but your insurance costs are so much more. My cousin lives in Miami area, and he pays almost $10,000 for homeowner's insurance on a little 1,200 square foot house. So just because taxes are higher here and lower in Florida doesn't mean it's cheaper to live there.
Yeah, there's even in Missouri, they have a property tax that, for instance, you have to pay a tax on certain things like your vehicle every year. We don't have that in Illinois, but we have the second highest property tax, real estate property taxes.
I don't disagree that. But, the problem is that, and I blame both parties, they're not putting good candidates up to change laws. They put up bad politicians. And it just, you take Ronner, for example, he didn't help us.
But listen, I mean, the Republican, former Republican governor, Bruce Rauner, he came in with a hostile House and Senate being led by former longtime Illinois House Speaker Michael Madigan, who now faces 23 federal counts of federal indictments. So he had that to contend with in the supermajority. Yeah.
We need better politicians. Plain and simple.
All right, well, see, I mean, I don't know. Yeah, a lot of people in Southern Illinois don't like how Chicago runs the states with policies, and you see the school curriculum, you see the push to ban certain types of weapons, you see a whole host of other liberal policies being implemented. These are all things that obviously also play into this, as does the weather. And the idea of moving to a more warm climate like Florida or Texas, those things also play into it. good. But do you predict that we're going to see fewer people in the report that comes out today?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right. Appreciate the call. Want to hear from more of you at 217-629-7970. That's the phone number here with Springfield's Morning News. Do you think we're growing or are we shrinking? So stay tuned. More of your calls coming up on 92.7 WMAY, Springfield's News and Talk. I'm Greg Bishop. Getting your calls as to whether you think Illinois is growing or shrinking. Expecting just about 32 minutes or so. The release from the U.S. Census that will show annual population estimates, including for Illinois, which has seen 8 consecutive years of population decline, according to the numbers released last year on this day. So what do you think? 217-629-7970. That's the phone number. Are we going to grow or are we going to shrink or are we going to plateau? And a lot of other indicators over the past 10 years showing that Illinois continues to lose population. But the population estimate's not the only thing that the U.S. Census is releasing. They've released several other reports this month so far. They've released census about schools and how many children are being enrolled in school all across the country. They don't have that broken down by state quite yet for the most recent data. They just have nationwide numbers, and I think the number was like 1.1% increase of kids being registered for school across all races and genders. But other statistics that they released this month includes small area income and poverty estimates. And if you go to their website, you can see this. And if you're watching along with us online, you can see just how Illinois is done. So the numbers they released just a week or so ago on poverty shows that Illinois' estimated poverty rate's about 12.1%. And if you look at surrounding states, Iowa's at 11.2, Wisconsin at 11.1, Indiana at 13, Missouri at 13.2% poverty, Kentucky at 16.7% poverty, which is pretty amazing. But how is that compared to last year? If you look at the chart, it shows that Illinois is increasing in its poverty rate, going from 11% in 2020 after a substantial decline over the several years from 2013 to 2014 to 2015, declining all the way down to 10.8%. to 11.2%, but then it jumped up to 12.1%. So that shows a little bit of another indicator of the amount of poverty that there is. But another indicator also that they released earlier this month was vacant housing, and Illinois actually saw a decrease in the number of vacant housing. But let's get to your calls. Do you think Illinois is going to grow or shrink? 217-629-7970. We've got about 30 minutes or so before they release the latest annual estimates. What's your prediction? Good morning.
I would say it's probably going to shrink even more. But especially if they pass certain legislation for our state, which is the gun laws, and the COVID vaccines for children in schools, if they make that mandatory. I mean, there's a lot of things that's going that way. You know what I mean? My thought is it's going to decline.
All right, so looking at a possible decline, we'll know if you're right in about 29 minutes. Good morning. You're on WMAY. Your prediction, are we going to grow or are we going to shrink?
Well, I live in Springfield. I've lived here most of my life, and I'd like to see the state grow. But just personally witnessing Springfield myself, I have seen, like, through Town and Country Shopping Center and other places. I talked to a business owner a few years ago, and he said he was leaving just because of the whole situation. He said it's not good here, so he left. And if you go to those shopping centers, unfortunately, there's just a lot of empty stores there,
And if you look at the business climate, that's one thing I hear a lot from businesses as well, that the costs for employing people in Illinois is higher. Everything from higher workers' compensation insurance costs to higher payroll taxes to even the unemployment taxes that employers have to pay when you're looking at like manufacturing jobs, for instance. All of those factors start stacking up, and other states may be more amenable or easier to do business in. So those are factors that takes jobs elsewhere, and people follow jobs.
Well, Springfield is a tourism city. I love this city. I hope, that we go the other direction, that we grow. But so far, my personal experiences, I've seen people leaving, and I don't want to see that happen.
So you do predict that we'll see continued decline?
Yes.
Appreciate the call, and we'll likely talk more about this as we get those numbers and digest them. And if you want to follow along, I am going to be turning a report around about this in short order. So follow me on Twitter, Bishop on Air, Facebook, Bishop on Air. Just search Bishop on Air across all social media, and we'll be able to connect that way. And you can also find this conversation and other conversations, interviews, call-in segments, all on our Facebook page or on the YouTube channel, Bishop on Air. Just search that and make it happen. It is Springfield's Morning News. I'm Greg Bishop on 92.7 WMAY, Springfield's News and Talk.